The morning of Mr. Rahim's discharge arrived quietly. The hospital felt different that day. Nurses moved about as usual, doctors hurried through the corridors, but for Amina, everything seemed slower. She stood by the window for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Today, room 207 would be empty. When she entered, Mr. Rahim was already dressed in simple clothes, waiting patiently in his chair. His face looked brighter than the day he had first been admitted, but there was a softness in his eyes, a sadness at the thought of leaving. "So, this is it," Amina said with a small smile, trying to sound cheerful. "Yes," Mr. Rahim replied gently. "The doctors say I am well enough to go home. But you know, this place does not feel like only a hospital to me anymore. It feels like a place where I found something I thought was lost." Amina's heart warmed at his words. She walked closer, helping him adjust his scarf. "You are strong, Mr. Rahim. You will be fine." He looked at her carefully. "I will be fine because of you, Amina. You gave me more care than I could have asked for. You gave me time, patience, and kindness. I don't know how to thank you." She shook her head with a smile. "You don't need to thank me. This is my duty. And, maybe it's also something I wanted to do. Sometimes, we don't choose who touches our hearts. It just happens." Her words lingered in the air. When the time came, hospital staff helped Mr. Rahim into a car waiting outside. Amina stood at the entrance, waving as he left. A strange emptiness filled her chest, but she reminded herself that this was part of her work. Patients came and went, and she had to let them go. Yet Mr. Rahim was different. He was not just another patient. He was someone whose pain had touched her soul, someone whose stories she would never forget. Days passed. The hospital returned to its usual rhythm, but Amina often found herself glancing at room 207, now filled with another patient. She missed the quiet evenings, the poems, the gentle conversations. But she comforted herself with the thought that Mr. Rahim was stronger now, carrying with him the warmth of their bond. Then, one evening, a letter arrived at the hospital addressed to her. It was in neat handwriting, sealed carefully. Amina opened it with curiosity. Inside, Mr. Rahim had written, "Dear Amina, I have been home for a week now, and though my house is still quiet, my heart no longer feels empty. I carry your promise with me. Every time I sit in silence, I remember your words, and they give me strength. I want you to know that you gave me a reason to believe in people again. I have lived a long life, full of success and wealth, but I learned from you that true richness comes from kindness. I want to share that kindness, just as you shared it with me. Please accept my gratitude in a way that I hope will make your life a little easier, just as you made mine brighter." Amina frowned in confusion as she unfolded another paper inside the envelope. It was an official document. Her eyes widened as she read Mr. Rahim had arranged for a scholarship fund in her name, to support young nursing students who struggled with financial needs. At the bottom, he had written, "This is not payment, Amina. This is gratitude. You reminded me that wealth should serve people, not just sit in walls. You gave me care, so I want to help others who will one day do the same." Tears filled Amina's eyes. She pressed the letter to her chest, overwhelmed. It wasn't the money that touched her, it was the thought behind it. Mr. Rahim had turned his gratitude into a gift for others, inspired by the simple kindness she had shown him. Weeks later, Amina received another surprise. One afternoon, as she finished her rounds, she saw a familiar figure standing by the hospital garden. Mr. Rahim, leaning on his cane but looking stronger, smiled as he spotted her. "You look healthier," she said warmly as she approached. "And you look just as kind," he replied with a soft laugh. "I came to see you, Amina. I wanted to thank you in person, not just with letters and papers." She shook her head. "You already did more than enough. The scholarship, the words. I don't need anything else." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Perhaps. But I need something else from you." "What is that?" she asked curiously. "Promise me you will continue to care for people the way you cared for me. Promise me you will never doubt the value of your kindness. It saved me, Amina. And I believe it will save many others too." Her throat tightened with emotion. She nodded firmly. "I promise." They sat together in the garden for a while, speaking of small things: the blooming flowers, the soft breeze, the lives they had touched. And in that simple moment, Amina realized something important: true wealth was not in money, nor in success, but in the connections people made, in the kindness they shared. That night, as Amina walked home, she looked up at the moon shining in the sky. She remembered Mr. Rahim's words about his wife, about silence, about love. And she whispered to herself, "No one is truly alone if someone cares." For Mr. Rahim, who once believed his life had nothing left but emptiness, the kindness of one nurse had lit a new path. And for Amina, who thought she was only giving comfort, she discovered that her care had the power to change lives far beyond what she could imagine. The story of their bond would live on, not in wealth, not in records, but in hearts. A reminder that even the simplest act of staying late to comfort someone could create a light strong enough to guide both souls out of darkness. The days of Mr. Rahim's stay at the hospital were slowly coming to an end. His health was improving, the doctors were pleased, and soon he would be discharged. For most patients, this news brought joy. But for Mr. Rahim, the thought of leaving filled him with quiet fear. At the hospital, he was not just healing physically, he was healing emotionally too. And the reason for that healing sat by his side every night, her gentle voice and caring smile making the silence less heavy. What would happen when he returned to his empty house, where no footsteps echoed, no laughter remained, and no voice broke the silence? One evening, as Amina entered his room, she noticed the unease in his eyes. He sat by the window, staring at the fading sunset. "You look thoughtful tonight," she said softly, pulling her chair closer. He sighed. "The doctors say I may go home in a few days." "That's good news," Amina replied, smiling. "It means your body is healing well." But Mr. Rahim shook his head. "Amina, healing the body is not the same as healing the heart. At home, there is no one waiting for me. I will go back to silence. I fear it will swallow me again." Her smile faded. She understood his pain. She had seen it in other patients, but with Mr. Rahim, it felt heavier. He had carried loneliness for so long that the idea of returning to it seemed unbearable. For a moment, she stayed quiet, then said gently, "Maybe healing the heart takes more than medicine. It takes time, and it takes people who care. You are not as alone as you think." Mr. Rahim looked at her, his eyes glistening. "Do you truly mean that? Or do you say it because you are kind?" "I mean it," Amina said firmly. "You may not have family close by, but you still have people around you. And as long as I am here, you will never be completely alone." Her words touched him deeply. For years, he had felt abandoned, forgotten, valued only for his wealth. But here was a young nurse, making a promise without asking for anything in return. That night, their conversation turned lighter. Amina told him about her own life, about the small apartment she lived in, about how she missed her grandmother who had raised her, and how sometimes she too felt the sting of loneliness. "You see," she said, smiling gently, "we are not so different. You lost someone you loved dearly, and I lost someone who was like my whole world. That's why I understand you. Loneliness is heavy, but when two people share it, it becomes lighter." Mr. Rahim nodded slowly, a tear slipping down his cheek. He did not hide it. Instead, he let it fall, because for once, he felt it was safe to show his heart. The following nights, their bond grew even stronger. Sometimes, Amina read to him, sometimes they simply spoke about small things like flowers, the weather, or the kindness of strangers. Other times, they sat in silence, yet it was no longer painful. It was the silence of comfort, not emptiness. One night, as she prepared to leave, Mr. Rahim said something that stayed with her. "Amina, you have been my medicine more than anything the doctors have given me. Your care, your patience, your presence, it has given me strength I thought I had lost. When I go home, I will carry your kindness with me." Her heart softened at his words. Kindness is not something you carry, Mr. Rahim. It is something you pass on. If you feel stronger now, maybe one day you will give someone else the same care. He smiled faintly. "Perhaps. But I will never forget that it was you who reminded me that life still holds warmth." As the day of his discharge drew closer, Amina felt mixed emotions. She was happy that he had regained his health, but she also worried about the loneliness that awaited him outside these hospital walls. On his last night at the hospital, the air felt different. Amina sat by his side longer than usual, neither of them speaking much. Finally, Mr. Rahim broke the silence. "Amina," he said softly, "you have given me more than you know. Before you, I thought my days would pass in emptiness. But you reminded me of the goodness still left in the world. Promise me one thing." She looked at him with gentle eyes. "What is it?" "Promise me you will never let your kindness fade. No matter how hard life becomes, no matter how lonely it feels, do not stop being the light you are. The world needs people like you." Amina felt tears prick her eyes. She nodded. "I promise." That night, as she left room 207, her heart felt heavy yet hopeful. She had not only been a nurse to him, she had become a companion, a listener, a reminder of humanity. And for Mr. Rahim, that promise was like a final gift before he stepped back into a world that had once seemed unbearably empty. He no longer felt afraid of the silence waiting for him. Because now, in his heart, he carried a promise of care, a bond that would remain even beyond the hospital walls. The bond between Amina and Mr. Rahim had become a part of both their lives. Each evening felt incomplete without their quiet conversations. Amina would step into room 207 with a gentle smile, and Mr. Rahim's tired face would light up with relief. For Amina, it was no longer only about duty, it was about care. She often told herself she was just doing what any good nurse should do, but deep down, she knew it was more. She looked forward to their talks, to the wisdom in his stories, and to the way he listened when she spoke of her own life. One evening, while Amina was arranging his medicines on the table, she overheard two doctors speaking just outside the room. They were discussing Mr. Rahim's progress. "He is recovering well," one doctor said. "But do you know who he really is? He owns several businesses in the city. A very wealthy man, though you wouldn't know it from the way he lives now. The second doctor lowered his voice, but Amina still caught the words. Yes, a millionaire. But he doesn't have much family left. Most people only cared about his wealth. That's why he ended up so lonely. Their voices faded as they walked down the corridor, leaving Amina standing still, her hands frozen above the table. She turned slowly toward Mr. Rahim. He had said nothing about wealth. Not once had he spoken of money, of success, or of the life people imagined millionaires had. He had only spoken of love, of loss, and of silence. Amina looked at him with new eyes. She saw the same gentle man she had sat with night after night. The same man who missed his wife, who loved rain, who smiled at poems. Nothing about him had changed, and yet the revelation felt heavy in her heart. She wondered, had he chosen not to tell her because he feared she might treat him differently? That evening, when Mr. Rahim noticed her quietness, he asked, "Is something troubling you, Amina?" She hesitated, then shook her head with a small smile. "No, I'm just a little tired today." She chose not to mention what she had overheard. To her, it didn't matter. He was still Mr. Rahim, the man who found comfort in her presence, not the wealthy figure the world saw. And she decided she would continue to treat him the same way. Over the next few nights, nothing changed in how she behaved. She still brought flowers, still read him poems, still listened to his stories. Mr. Rahim, however, noticed the effort behind her actions. She did everything with genuine care, never once making him feel like she expected something in return. One night, as rain tapped gently against the windows, Mr. Rahim finally spoke of it himself. "Amina," he began slowly, "I know you may have heard things about me from others in this hospital." She looked at him calmly. "Yes. But it does not change anything." He studied her face, searching for even a hint of greed or curiosity, but found none. Her eyes were as soft and honest as the first day she had sat by his bed. "Most people," he said, "see me as a man with money. But you see me as a man with memories. That is something I cannot put a price on." Amina lowered her gaze, touched by his words. "I see you as someone who has lived, who has loved, and who still has more to share. Wealth cannot make someone less lonely. Kindness can." Her words filled the room with silence, the good kind, the kind that made hearts lighter. That night, Mr. Rahim opened up in a way he never had before. He told her about his businesses, about the years he had spent building them, about how he once thought success meant happiness. "But when Salma left this world," he said, his voice breaking, "I realized that all I had built was empty without her. Wealth filled my home but not my heart." Amina listened with patience, her presence steady. She did not pity him, nor did she admire his wealth. She simply listened, and that was enough. By the time dawn approached, Mr. Rahim felt something shift inside him. For years, he had kept his true self hidden behind walls of silence. But now, with Amina, he felt safe enough to let those walls fall. As Amina prepared to leave, he said softly, "You remind me of the goodness I thought was gone from this world. Thank you, Amina, for treating me like a person, not a name." She smiled gently. "That's all I ever wanted, to remind you that you are not alone." And as she walked down the quiet corridor, Amina realized that the secret she had learned didn't change how she saw him. If anything, it made her respect him more for being strong, for enduring silence, and for still carrying love in his heart despite the emptiness around him. Neither of them knew it yet, but this bond of trust and kindness was preparing them for something far greater. The days slowly turned into weeks. Each evening, after finishing her shift, Amina found herself drawn back to room 207. It had become a quiet habit, something her heart refused to give up. She would walk in softly, and each time she did, Mr. Rahim's face would brighten just a little more than the night before. At first, their talks had been about his memories, his late wife, and the silence that followed her loss. But soon, their conversations grew lighter. They began speaking of simple things like the taste of hospital food, the changing weather, or the small joys of life. One night, Amina brought a small book with her. It was a collection of short poems. She placed it gently on his bedside table. "Would you like me to read for you?" she asked. Mr. Rahim adjusted his pillow and smiled faintly. "It has been years since someone read to me." "Please, go ahead." Her voice filled the quiet room as she read line after line, her tone soft and steady. The poems were simple, but her way of reading gave them new life. Mr. Rahim closed his eyes, listening not just to the words but to the warmth behind them. When she finished, he said, "Your voice reminds me of evenings long ago. Salma used to read aloud, too. For a few moments, I felt like I was back there." Amina smiled gently. "Maybe stories and poems carry us to the places we miss." From that night on, she often brought small things with her, sometimes a poem, sometimes a flower, sometimes even a cup of homemade soup. They were never grand gifts, but each one carried thought and care. And each time, Mr. Rahim's heart grew lighter. One evening, rain poured outside the hospital windows. The air smelled fresh, and droplets tapped against the glass. Mr. Rahim watched the rain with quiet wonder. "Salma loved the rain," he said softly. "She would stand by the window for hours, just listening. I never understood how something so simple made her so happy. Now, when I hear rain, I think of her." Amina pulled her chair closer. "Maybe she liked it because rain makes the world feel alive again. It washes away dust and brings new life." Mr. Rahim looked at her thoughtfully. "Perhaps. You see things with gentle eyes, Amina. The way you speak, it feels like you notice beauty where others may not." Her cheeks warmed, but she only smiled. "Maybe it comes from being with patients. I've learned that small joys matter the most when life feels heavy." Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. For Amina, Mr. Rahim was no longer just a patient, he was like a wise elder, a reminder of how fragile yet beautiful life could be. For Mr. Rahim, Amina was no longer just a nurse, she was a light in his lonely nights, a presence that reminded him of kindness and care. One night, Mr. Rahim looked at her and said, "You remind me of my granddaughter." Amina blinked in surprise. "You have a granddaughter?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, but she lives far away. We rarely speak. Life has scattered the people I love. Sometimes I feel like the world has forgotten me." Amina's heart tightened. "The world has not forgotten you, Mr. Rahim. And I promise, as long as you're here, you are not alone." Her words touched him deeply. For the first time in years, he felt like someone truly cared, not for his name, not for his wealth, but simply for him. As the nights continued, the nurses in the hospital began to notice Amina's habit of staying back. Some teased her gently, saying she spent too much time with the quiet old man. But Amina never minded. She knew her presence was helping him heal in a way medicine alone could not. And she, too, was changing. Each evening spent with Mr. Rahim taught her patience, gratitude, and the beauty of listening. She began to look forward to their conversations, to the way his tired eyes lit up when he spoke of his memories. One evening, as she prepared to leave, Mr. Rahim stopped her with a quiet question. "Amina, why do you come here every night? You could go home and rest. Why spend your time with an old man like me?" She looked at him with soft eyes. "Because I believe no one should feel lonely. If my presence can make even one night easier for you, then it is worth more than sleep or rest. I don't see you as just a patient. I see you as someone with stories worth hearing." His eyes glistened, though he quickly looked away. For years, he had believed his stories no longer mattered. But here was a young woman proving otherwise. That night, as Amina walked out of the room, Mr. Rahim whispered to himself, "Maybe life has given me another chance not to relive the past, but to feel alive again." And in her quiet apartment, Amina thought of him too. She realized that in comforting him, she was also comforting herself. Their bond was not one-sided, it was two souls meeting in the silence of the night, helping each other heal. The following days passed with the same quiet rhythm. Amina would finish her duties, check on her patients, and then, when the night grew silent, she would find herself back in room 207. It had almost become a part of her routine, though no one had asked her to do it. Mr. Rahim was waiting each time, awake, his tired eyes softening the moment she stepped inside. What had once been silence and loneliness was slowly being replaced with gentle conversations and shared moments. On the third night of her visits, Amina noticed something different. Mr. Rahim was holding an old leather wallet in his hands, worn with age. He kept looking at a photograph inside it, his fingers tracing the faded edges as if afraid the picture might disappear. Amina quietly sat down beside him. "Is that your family?" she asked gently. Mr. Rahim's eyes lingered on the photograph before he slowly handed it to her. It showed a younger version of him standing proudly beside a woman with kind eyes and a bright smile. Her hand rested on his arm, and her presence lit up the picture more than anything else. "That is my wife," he said softly. His voice carried both love and sorrow. Her name was Salma. Amina studied the photo carefully, then looked back at him. "She looks gentle," she said, smiling. "She was," Mr. Rahim replied. "She was the gentlest soul I ever knew. We were married for more than 40 years. She filled every corner of my life with warmth. She had a way of turning even the smallest moment into something meaningful. A cup of tea, a walk in the garden, reading together in silence, all of it felt like happiness because she was there." His words were steady, but his eyes shimmered with pain. Amina felt her heart ache for him. "What happened to her?" she asked softly. Mr. Rahim took a deep breath. "It was sudden. She fell ill, and before I could truly understand, she was gone. People told me I should be grateful for the years we had, but gratitude does not stop the silence when you open your door and no one answers. It does not stop the emptiness at the dinner table. Wealth, success, property, none of it mattered when she was gone." His voice grew quiet. For a long moment, he just stared at the photograph. Amina placed her hand gently on the edge of his bed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rahim. I can't imagine how hard that must have been for you." He gave a faint nod, then continued, almost as if speaking aloud relieved his heavy heart. "You see, child, everyone around me thought I was strong because I had money, because I never asked for help. But inside, I was crumbling. My home became like a shell, big, silent, and empty. I stopped inviting people. I stopped celebrating. I even stopped talking. And the world thought I was fine, because from the outside, Wealth looks like happiness. Amina listened with full attention, her eyes soft. She did not interrupt, nor did she rush him. She knew that sometimes, the heart healed a little every time it was allowed to speak. After a pause, she said quietly, "It must have been very lonely." Mr. Rahim let out a deep sigh. Lonely is a small word for it. There were nights when I wished I could hear her voice, just once. Even a scolding, even silence beside me would have been enough. But all I had was the ticking clock on the wall. Amina lowered her gaze. His words reminded her of her own struggles. She was not married, but she had grown up without her parents, raised by her grandmother. After her grandmother's passing, Amina often returned to an empty apartment. She understood silence. She understood the weight of rooms with no voices. Quietly, she said, "I know what silence feels like too. It can be heavy. But you are not alone now. You still have stories, and as long as you share them, someone will carry them with you." Mr. Rahim looked at her with surprise, almost as if he hadn't expected anyone to say such words. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen not as a patient, not as an old man, not as someone with wealth, but as a person with wounds that needed care. The clock ticked on, but neither of them noticed. Mr. Rahim spoke more that night about how he met Salma at a bookshop, how she loved planting roses, how her laughter filled their home like music. His eyes lit up with every memory, and Amina listened, smiling, asking small questions that kept him going. By the time she left, the photograph lay neatly on his bedside table, no longer clutched tightly in his hands. Mr. Rahim's heart felt lighter, as though sharing the memories had brought Salma back to him in some way. And Amina, walking down the quiet corridor, felt something stir inside her. She had not just comforted a patient, she had opened a door for a lonely soul to let his memories breathe again. Neither of them knew it, but these conversations were weaving an invisible bond between them. A bond that would soon grow stronger than either expected. The next evening, Amina walked into the hospital with her usual calmness. Her day had been busy, filled with patients needing medicine, reports, and check UPS. But somewhere in her mind, she kept thinking about the quiet man in room 207. Mr. Rahim's lonely eyes had stayed with her all day, like a shadow she couldn't shake off. When her shift neared its end, Amina felt her heart pull her back to his room once again. The hallway was dim, nurses whispering softly as they moved between patients. She gently pushed the door open and found Mr. Rahim awake, sitting up just as he had the night before. "You are still awake?" she asked, smiling. Mr. Rahim turned his head, the faintest glimmer of recognition in his tired eyes. "Yes. Nights are long," he replied. His voice carried both strength and sadness. Amina stepped inside, carrying a small cup of tea she had prepared for herself. She hesitated, then offered it to him. "Would you like some? It's plain, no sugar. Good for the heart." To her surprise, he accepted. Slowly, with shaky hands, he lifted the cup and sipped. For a few moments, they sat in silence, the warm drink filling the cold room with a sense of comfort. "It tastes simple," Mr. Rahim said quietly. Amina laughed softly. "That's because I am a simple person. I don't add much to my tea." Something in her tone made him smile faintly. "Simple is not always bad," he said, as if he were remembering something far away. The room fell into silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was the kind of silence that allowed two people to think, to breathe, and to feel the presence of another human being. Amina folded her hands on her lap. Do you want to talk about something, Mr. Rahim? Sometimes sharing helps the night pass faster. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed. I used to talk every night. I had someone to listen. But now, the walls don't answer back. Amina's heart softened at his words. She didn't press him further, but she nodded, showing she was ready to listen if he wanted to continue. Mr. Rahim's gaze moved to the window. The moonlight fell across his face, revealing lines of sorrow carved over many years. My wife, she was my listener. Every evening we would sit, just like this, and she would ask me about my day. It didn't matter if I spoke of big things or small things. She listened, and that made life lighter. Amina stayed quiet, respecting the weight of his memory. She passed away years ago, he whispered, his voice almost breaking. Since then, the nights have been long and empty. I thought time would ease it, but it hasn't. I stopped speaking, because there was no one left to listen. Amina felt a lump in her throat. She had heard many stories from patients, stories of pain, of families, of loss, but there was something in Mr. Rahim's honesty that touched her deeply. She spoke gently. Sometimes, life takes away the people we love, but it gives us others to share a few moments with. Maybe I cannot replace her, but if you want, I can be your listener tonight. Mr. Rahim looked at her, his eyes shining with both surprise and gratitude. For a long while, he didn't answer. Then he nodded slowly. That would mean a lot. So, he began to speak. At first, his words were scattered memories of his younger days, his travels, his work. He spoke of the city changing over time, of gardens he once walked in, of books he loved to read. Amina listened with patience, sometimes smiling, sometimes asking small questions that encouraged him to go on. The more he spoke, the lighter his tone became. His voice, once weighed down by loneliness, carried warmth again. For the first time in years, he wasn't talking to walls, he was talking to someone who truly cared. Hours passed unnoticed. The clock ticked, nurses came and went, but inside room 207, time seemed to slow down. At one point, Mr. Rahim looked at Amina and asked, "Why are you here? Your shift must be over. Don't you have a home to return to?" Amina smiled softly. "I do. But home will wait. Right now, this is more important." Those words struck something deep within him. He had met many people in his long life, business partners, acquaintances, even distant relatives, but few had ever said something so selfless. When the night grew late, and Amina finally stood to leave, Mr. Rahim's voice stopped her. "Thank you, Amina," he said quietly. "For listening. For sitting here. Tonight, I did not feel like a burden." Her heart ached at his words. "You are not a burden, Mr. Rahim. You are someone who still has stories to share. And stories should never be left in silence." She left the room with a gentle smile, but her mind was full of thoughts. She didn't know why she cared so much for this man she had only recently met. Yet something inside told her this bond was only the beginning of something important. And as Mr. Rahim lay back on his bed, his heart felt a little lighter. For the first time in years, he fell asleep not to the echo of silence, but to the memory of a kind voice that had chosen to listen. The hospital corridors were quiet that evening. Only the soft beeping of machines and the slow footsteps of nurses could be heard. Amina walked down the hall with a calm smile, even though her shift had officially ended an hour ago. She was tired, her feet ached, but her heart wouldn't let her leave just yet. Amina was known among her colleagues as the nurse who never rushed home. She often stayed longer, making sure her patients were comfortable. For her, nursing was not only a job, it was a calling. She believed that kindness could sometimes be more powerful than medicine. That night, as she passed by room 207, she noticed the door slightly open. Inside, she saw an old man sitting upright on his bed, staring out of the window. His name was Mr. Rahim. He had been admitted a few weeks ago after a minor surgery. The doctors said his body was healing, but his spirit seemed heavy. He rarely spoke, and nobody came to visit him. Amina paused. She could have gone home. Her body begged for rest, but something about the lonely figure on that bed held her back. She gently knocked and stepped inside. "Mr. Rahim, are you still awake?" she asked softly. He turned his head slowly, his eyes tired but sharp. "Yes, I couldn't sleep," he replied in a low voice. Amina pulled a chair closer to his bed. "Sometimes it's hard to sleep in a hospital. Too many sounds, too many thoughts," she said with a gentle laugh. Mr. Rahim gave a faint smile, but his silence told her there was more behind his wakefulness than just hospital noise. His hands rested on the blanket, thin and pale, as if they carried years of untold stories. "Would you like me to sit with you for a while?" Amina asked. There was a brief pause. Then, almost like a child admitting a hidden wish, he said, "I would like that." So, Amina stayed. The clock ticked on the wall, and the faint light from the hallway slipped into the room. At first, they didn't talk much. Amina simply sat there, her presence enough to fill the silence that had been haunting him. Sometimes, companionship didn't need words. After a while, Amina noticed the way Mr. Rahim kept glancing at the window. "It's a peaceful night," she said, looking out with him. "The sky is clear. The moon looks bright." He followed her gaze and nodded. "My wife loved watching the moon," he murmured, almost to himself. Amina didn't push him to say more, but she listened carefully. That single sentence told her more than pages of medical reports ever could. This man was not just a patient. He was a human being with memories, with love, with loss. The night stretched on. Nurses passed in the hallway, and Amina was called once or twice, but she returned to his room each time. Mr. Rahim slowly began to speak more. He asked her simple questions: how long had she been a nurse, whether she liked the work, whether she lived far from the hospital. Amina answered with honesty, her voice warm and calm. She told him she had been a nurse for 5 years, that sometimes the work was tiring but always rewarding, and that she rented a small apartment nearby so she could walk to work. "And you never feel lonely?" Mr. Rahim asked suddenly. Amina smiled. "Sometimes I do. But then I remind myself that I meet people here every day. Each patient becomes like a story in my life. And in a way, their stories keep me company." Mr. Rahim looked at her with quiet surprise. "That is a kind way of seeing things," he said. It was the first time Amina saw a hint of warmth in his eyes. As the minutes turned into hours, Amina realized that Mr. Rahim wasn't simply unable to sleep, he was lonely. Nights in the hospital were long, especially when no family or friends came to visit. The silence could be louder than any pain. So, she kept him company, talking softly, sometimes just sitting quietly by his side. The bond between them was fragile but real, like the first spark of a candle in darkness. When the clock struck midnight, Amina finally stood up. "I should let you rest now, Mr. Rahim. Tomorrow will be a better day," she said kindly. He looked at her, his expression softer than before. "Thank you, Nurse Amina. You made this night less empty." She nodded, touched by his words. "Good night, Mr. Rahim." As she walked out of the room, she felt something shift in her heart. She didn't know why she had stayed so long, but deep inside, she felt it was the right thing to do. And for Mr. Rahim, who had spent many nights swallowed by silence, this was the first night in years when he didn't feel completely alone.